Most games give you a gun. Subnautica took it away. No weapons, no teammates, no safety net. Just you, an alien ocean, and whatever is waiting in the dark below. That's the premise of Subnautica, one of the most beloved survival games ever made. This is the history of Subnautica, the studio that dared to make it, and how it all came crashing down. To understand Subnautica, you have to go back to the year 2001 and to a modder named Charlie Cleveland. Cleveland was a fan of Half-Life who had an idea. A hybrid game where soldiers and alien life forms shared a world, blending an FPS and an RTS. That idea became Natural Selection, a free, fan-made mod for Half-Life. Against all odds, it became a phenomenon. The mod was downloaded thousands of times, and its success convinced Cleveland that he had something real. In May 2001, he formalized the dream. Unknown Worlds Entertainment was born. Soon after, Max McGuire joined as a co-founder and technical director, and the two began working towards a bold commercial sequel, Natural Selection 2. Natural Selection 2 finally launched in 2012 after over half a decade of development. It was a technical achievement, a fully custom engine, a hybrid genre no one had quite attempted. The community loved it, but the team, they were exhausted. After years of intense, competitive, high-stress multiplayer development, Charlie Cleveland needed something different. Around this same time, Cleveland was watching the rise of Minecraft, a game he said that transformed the game industry by throwing away all traditional challenge and progression structures in favor of pure creative exploration. He was also drawn to the ocean, to James Cameron's filmography, The Abyss, The Titanic, and that feeling of diving into something vast and unknown. In 2013, Subnautica began as an idea, and that idea was simple. Put the player underwater, alone, on an alien world, and let them discover what's down there. The early prototypes were rough and experimental. The first versions were barely more than being underwater. Simple environments, basic creatures, just the feeling of the ocean. Then biomes were added, then creatures, then the beginnings of crafting. One early vision involved procedurally generated worlds and heavily science-focused gameplay. But the team noticed something when players started playing. The science stuff didn't resonate emotionally. What did resonate was fear. Big creatures, dark water. The sense that something massive was in the blackness below you. They dropped the vague science elements and leaned fully into emotion. Into wonder and dread. Into the thrill of the unknown. On December 16th, 2014, after roughly a year and a half of development, Subnautica launched in Steam Early Access. Cleveland, talking back on this moment, said they were on the brink of financial disaster. Unknown Worlds needed the community's support, and fortunately, they got it. The early access period was raw. The hunger and thirst mechanics weren't even in the game yet. When a player's critique about the absence struck home, the team took it seriously and added a survival system. They discovered listening to the community not only improved the game, but also helped it succeed financially. Over the course of 3.5 years, the game grew dramatically. Players submitted hundreds of thousands of in-game feedback tickets, and the team watched what caused fear, what created wonder, and what made players keep playing. Every content update was a conversation between developers and the community. The story emerged almost organically this way. Cleveland and the team saw players wanting something deeper, wanting a reason to keep going beyond survival. So breadcrumb by breadcrumb, they wove a narrative into the world. A crashed spaceship called the Aurora, a deadly alien bacterium called the Kara, an ancient civilization called the Architects, and a sea emperor Leviathan who had been waiting for someone to help it. Crucially, the story was never forced on you. You could follow it or not. The choice was up to you. On January 23, 2018, Subnautica left early access and fully launched. Critics and players reacted immediately. IGN gave it a 9.1 out of 10, and it sold. Subnautica passed 5 million copies sold by January 2020, an extraordinary achievement for an indie company. At the 2018 Golden Joystick Awards, Subnautica won PC Game of the Year, and Unknown Worlds Entertainment won the Breakthrough Award and the Fan Favorite Indie Game Prize at the Gamers' Choice Awards. With Subnautica's success still echoing across the industry, Unknown Worlds faced a question every successful studio has to answer. What's next? Their answer came fast. Just weeks after Subnautica's full release in January 2018, the team began teasing something new. In August of that year, they announced Subnautica Below Zero. Originally pitched as a DLC expansion, but the scope kept growing. What started as an add-on became something bigger. A standalone game with a new protagonist, a new story, and a new set of challenges, both above and below the waterline. And almost immediately, development became one of the most turbulent in the studio's history. Below Zero launched into early access with an ambitious story structure. The new character Robin had a direct line of communication with her sister Sam, who is alive on a nearby orbital station. The two would interact in real time as Robin explored the planet below. It was a bold idea, a way to ground the player emotionally in a way that the original Subnautica never attempted. But it wasn't working. The team watched players respond, read the forums, and ran internal playtests, and kept arriving at the same conclusion. The constant communication with Sam was undermining the one thing that made the original Subnautica so powerful: the feeling of being completely alone. Players weren't scared. They weren't isolated. They had someone talking to them the whole time. Then the lead writer left the project, development stalled, and by November 2019, Unknown Worlds made the call. The story had to be rebuilt from the ground up. A new writer, Jill Murray, was brought in, and the entire narrative and everything connected was being torn out and replaced. It was a significant gamble, but the team pushed forward. On May 14th, 2021, over 2 years after its early access launch, Subnautica Below Zero released in full, across PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. The reception was warm, but split. Critics praised the environment's design and called it a genuine improvement over the original in terms of visuals. But the story divided people. The original Subnautica had no voice protagonist. Riley Robinson, the player character, never spoke. That silence was intentional. It put you in the suit. You weren't watching someone survive. You were surviving. Below Zero broke that. Robin talks. She reacts. She has opinions. It was a game that clearly wrestled with its own identity during development. But it sold. It expanded the universe, and it kept Unknown Worlds afloat and growing, heading into what should have been their biggest chapter yet. In October 2021, Unknown Worlds was acquired by Krafton, the South Korean publishing giant behind PUBG. On paper, it looked like a win. Krafton promised the studio full creative independence. The founders, Cleveland, McGuire, and CEO Ted Gill, would stay in charge, and development on a new Subnautica began. Buried in the acquisition deal was a clause that would later detonate the entire relationship: a $250 million earnout. If Subnautica 2 hit specific sales milestones during a defined window, Krafton owned Unknown Worlds and employees that payout. Then came early 2025. Subnautica 2 had been in development for years and was tracking towards an early access launch later that year. The game had accumulated over 2.5 million Steam wishlists. Internal financial projections shared with Krafton in the first week of April showed the targets required to trigger the earnout were not just reachable, they were likely to be exceeded. And Krafton started to panic. Krafton allegedly stopped working on localization for multiple markets, ceased payments to external suppliers, and instructed internal teams to halt all creative tasks related to Subnautica 2. In May, a milestone review took place. Krafton's own creative director reportedly agreed that the game should launch in August as planned, and warned that removing Gill from the project would add 2 years to development. Crafton pushed forward anyway. In June, Crafton offered the founders a reduced payout if they agreed to delay. They refused. On June 25th, Crafton's head of corporate development informed Gill directly. The plan was to remove the Unknown Worlds board and fire the founders. On July 2nd, 2025, it happened. Charlie Cleveland, Max McGuire, and Ted Gill were removed from their positions. No detailed explanation was given publicly. Subnautica 2 was delayed to 2026. The next day, Cleveland posted to Reddit. He said the game was ready, and he said there would be more to come. He wasn't wrong. The lawsuit landed on July 16th, 2025, filed in the Delaware Court of Chancery on behalf of Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill. The founders claimed Crafton had engineered a deliberate, months-long campaign to prevent Subnautica 2 from launching in 2025, for one reason: to avoid paying $250 million. The suit alleged Crafton had established a secret internal task force with a single mandate: either renegotiate the earnout downward or take over Unknown Worlds entirely. They called it Project X. The lawsuit also claimed Crafton's CEO, Changjiang Kim, had consulted ChatGPT to brainstorm ways to avoid paying the earnout. Crafton fired back. Their position was that the founders had quietly checked out after the acquisition, that Cleveland had privately described himself as being in semi-retirement, and that McGuire had similarly disengaged. They argued the game was not ready for release, and launching prematurely would damage the Subnautica brand. Ironic. They accused the founders of downloading tens of thousands of confidential company files before and after their termination, including what they described as a blueprint for the Subnautica series. The trial began on November 17, 2025. Crafton said the evidence proved the founders had abandoned their posts and deceived the company. The founders said the evidence proved Crafton had broken every promise it made at acquisition. Caught in the middle of it, the game itself, the remaining staff at Unknown Worlds, and the millions of fans, including myself, who have been waiting years for the next game from a studio they loved, now unsure what to believe. On March 16, 2026, the Delaware Vice Chancellor handed down her ruling, and it was not close. The court rejected every justification Crafton had put forward. The claims that the founders had abandoned their posts? Irrelevant. The accusations of stolen data? Dismissed. The argument that the game wasn't ready? False. The judge found that Crafton had engineered the delay, not discovered it. And then there was the ChatGPT detail. With the risk of paying out a $250 million bonus looming, Kim didn't call his lawyers. He opened ChatGPT. The ruling noted that the company executives are expected to exercise independent human judgment, not outsource critical decisions to an AI chatbot. Ted Gill was ordered reinstated as CEO of Unknown Worlds immediately, with full operational authority, including sole control over when Subnautica 2 launches. Crafton was ordered to restore his access to Steam at once, and was barred from interfering with the release in any way. The earnout period, originally set to expire December 31st, 2025, was expanded by 258 days to September 15th, 2026, with the option to push it further into 2027. Cleveland and McGuire were not reinstated to their former roles, but the court noted their reduced involvement had been known and accepted by Crafton long before the firings. Crafton said it respectfully disagrees with the ruling and is evaluating its options. A Phase 2 of litigation covering money damages and whether Crafton deliberately impaired the earnout is still ahead. As of now, Subnautica 2 is the most wishlisted game on Steam. Ted Gill is back in charge. The lawyers are still arguing, and the ocean, finally, after everything, is almost ready. Thank you for watching to the end of my first YouTube video. I hope you enjoyed it, and of course, any support is greatly appreciated. And if you're quick enough, you can be my first subscriber.